Hello everyone, David here. I went down a bit of a rabbit hole with this one. I started off just looking for a decent video adapter for my GameCube. Should I use the analog or digital out? And which of the many options is best? Is it worth shelling out extra for the more expensive adapters? The answer is yes, it absolutely is worth getting the digital adapter if you have the port available on your GameCube. But I also discovered that it's now possible to soft mod your cube, run Homebrew, back up your games, and enable progressive scan modes even on PAL consoles for a massive video quality boost. I discovered that this console is a complicated beast, which supported nearly every video standard when it came out in 2002 in Europe. NTSC, PAL, interlaced, progressive scan, composite S-video, component RGB, in various incarnations, it did them all. So I'm going to boil down the information as best I can in this video and explain how to unlock several useful apps without any soldering or disassembly required. First of all, the video out. Before you go any further, take a look at the back of your GameCube. Do you have both an analog and digital output port? If so, you're in luck. You have one of the coveted DOL-101 models, the early ones. In which case, go ahead and drop the digital adapter in your shopping cart. If you don't have the digital port, just analog, then you have a later model revision, the DOL-101. But don't worry, all is not lost. Skip to this timecode for your options. So, full disclosure, Kaico sent me this digital adapter for testing, along with a few others, but no money changed hands, and all opinions are my own. It comes with a handy support that clips into a vent underneath the port and helps support the weight of the adapter. Neat! You also get a remote control so you can tweak the output in real time, and a USB cable to update the firmware, although I didn't need to do that myself. The digital adapter uses the digital component out from the GameCube. Yes, even though component cables are usually analog, this used a different format, and converts it to an HDMI signal. The input signal could be anything from a range of resolutions and interlaced or progressive modes, so it handily shows you what it's converting when it receives a new signal. And my first impressions are that the output quality is great. It's a clean, bright HDMI signal and looks surprisingly good even on my 77-inch OLED TV, something that was barely imaginable back in 2002 when this system launched. Compared to the basic composite output, which I've captured here using the original cables and my SCART to HDMI adapter, it's a much crisper signal, with some pleasantly chunky, visible pixels that I'd expect from a console of this era. The digital output port has a bit of interesting history to it. It seems like Nintendo had some plans to release a monitor that would plug directly into it, and possibly even have some kind of stereoscopic 3D features. But these never saw the light of day, so I presume Nintendo removed the port as some kind of cost-cutting exercise later. There was an official digital out-to-component cable that was released in Japan only. They're rather hard to find, and obsolete now anyway, because not many TVs have component inputs anymore. So I'm glad that other options have matured enough that we get a nice little HDMI converter in its self-contained box. Now, if your games are outputting an interlace signal, you may see a bit of flickering in some titles. This is because at the edges, the interlacing is swapping back and forth between elements that are visible or invisible in the alternating lines, and the line doubler is then doubling them up. A quick fix is to grab your remote control for the adapter, hit the menu button in the top left corner and disable line doubling. It's there to increase compatibility for the most part, but that's only really useful in the handful of games that use the 240p output mode, and just in case some TVs don't support it. There are also some interesting options for scan lines if you want to simulate that CRT look, although I'm not a big fan myself. I prefer a clean, albeit blocky, image. A better fix for the flickering is to enable progressive scan modes and use 480p, which is easily done in most titles on NTSC consoles. Simply select it when the game boots. But on PAL consoles, we have to get a bit more creative. Here's where we can start running Homebrew and unlocking some cool extra features of the cube. There are a few ways of doing this, including using game-save exploits, or soldering in a mod chip so you can run custom software from a mini DVD directly. But I'm going to suggest a method that is cheap, makes no permanent changes to your hardware, and requires no soldering or unscrewing of any devices. Find a copy of SD Media Launcher. For me, I found it for a very reasonable £22 on Amazon. It comes with a memory card, which is also an SD card port, known as an SD Gecko, and a disc that, although not pictured in the advert for some reason, showed up with the official Action Replay logo on. It's a manufactured disc, not a DVD-R, so the Cube will read it without needing any modifications. It comes with this cryptic message on the packaging. I'd love to know the legal history of what's going on here, but either way, this is what we want. Go and download a tool called Swiss from GitHub. And while you're there, pick up CleanRip and emGBA as well. Dig up an SD card, and here's where it's a little tricksy. It needs to be an old school SD card, not SDHC or SDXC. Maximum 2 GB. Connect it to your computer and format it as FAT. It may already be in that format, in which case just wipe it. Once that is done, drop the swiss.dol file into the root of the memory card. You can use one of them to enable auto boot, but I like to manually select it so I have options. And put the CleanRip and emGBA DOL files in there too. You may want to organize the directory structure, that's up to you. Now, put the SD card into the memory card adapter and plug that into your GameCube. Into slot B is fine. Then insert your Action Replay disc. It should now present you with a basic file manager when you boot up the Cube. Scroll down and run Swiss. So called because it's like a Swiss Army knife. It lets you change a lot of options on your console. The first one we want to do is to force progressive scan modes. So go to Options, scroll right until you reach the Game Video Output mode and switch it to 480p. Now, if you insert a PAL region disk, press X on the controller to select the drive and boot it. It'll patch the game to run in progressive scan. So cool! This is something that PAL region games could never do before, but it runs perfectly for almost all titles because it was available in the NTSC versions. Check this list if you want to make sure it'll run okay, but the most popular titles are all fine. Just make sure you select the 60Hz mode when the game starts, as 480p at 50Hz can produce some odd artifacts. So you can use this method to start all your PAL games in 480p, but will you get annoyed at having to swap disks? You need to boot up using the Action Replay, then go to Swiss every time, and then put the game disk in. Is there an easier way? Well, obviously, yes. If you have a serial port 2 socket underneath your GameCube, you can buy an SD to SP2 adapter, dump your games onto an SD card, and run them directly from there. No more disks required. The adapter itself is fairly cheap. I got this one for £7 from Amazon. And you can use a much bigger capacity card this time. 256GB will work just fine. But you need to format the card as FAT32 on your computer and then insert it into the adapter. Make sure it goes in the right way and then have a look under your console. Undo the flap for the serial port 2 socket and carefully insert the adapter. It also has a right and a wrong way to do it, so make sure you check which side should be facing in and out of the console. Once that's in, put the cover back on and boot into Action Replay. We could go via Swiss, but here's where I like to have options. You can boot straight into CleanRip from the memory card. Start it up, select SD card, FAT, and then the SP2 as your image target. Then swap out the disk for the one you want to back up. Then press A to start, and it will take about 25 minutes to read the full disk. This is a bit of a time-consuming process, especially if you have a lot of games, but at the end you'll have a backup of your games on the SD card, so you can put your disks back into storage for safekeeping. For me, it says the MD5 doesn't match at the end, but that's only because it doesn't have internet access. You can always go to redump.org yourself and check if you want to make sure you have an uncorrupted image. I love this because now your whole games library is available right from the GameCube without having to swap disks or memory card adapters or anything. Just start up from the Action Replay disk, go to Swiss, and then select the image of the game you want. You might want to reorganize it a little bit so that they're in folders or rename them, but you should be able to tell which game is which just from the icon. And yeah, this will save you having to get up from the sofa, but also wear and tear on the disk drive. I think it's super convenient. But we're just getting started. There are some other cool homebrew releases like emGBA, a Game Boy Advance emulator. This lets you play GBA games at full speed without requiring the Game Boy player attachment at all, something I never picked up. It works surprisingly well and makes use of the progressive scan output as well, so you get a nice clean image out of it. If you do have the Game Boy player, you can download Game Boy Interface, which interacts with the hardware and gives you more control of its output when playing GBA games. I haven't tried it myself, but it seems to be now superior to using the original software that came bundled with it. So that's a bit of a whirlwind tour of unlocking the GameCube, and I hope it's got you started. But what if you don't have one of these old school models with the digital out and the SP2 socket? Unfortunately, your options are a bit more limited. You can't use the SD to SP2 adapter, and you're limited to what you can fit on the 2GB memory card SD Gecko. You can still run Swiss, but progressive scan won't work out of the analog video port. So what's your best bet? Well, if you have an NTSC region console, the Kaico line doubler will do the trick, as it can convert the still quite good S-video signal. But if you have a PAL console, you'll want to make use of the RGB out instead. You could try to dig up an original RGB SCART cable, then use some expensive adapters to convert that RGB SCART signal to HDMI. But beware, not all SCART to HDMI adapters are equal, and some cheap ones only convert the composite signal, not RGB. So you'll end up with a rather muddy output in that case. I think the best bet is to wait until the RAD2X is back in stock and shell out for that. It's usually about £50, but converts the RGB signal on PAL GameCubes direct to HDMI, and it's the next best quality you can get after the digital out. Of course, if you're hooking up your GameCube again after 20 years and you just want it to work, you're not worried about the most clean possible video signal, then go ahead and use an analog adapter. It'll work using the composite out anyway, and the games are still fun to play. The Kaico line doubler will convert the analog out from either region console, and it has a button on the back to switch between video modes, so make sure you're using S-Video for NTSC and Composite for PAL. You can also toggle the line doubling and smoothing options on and off, so give them a try until you find the setup that looks best with your game. It, along with its digital counterpart, are both sturdy little units that get the job done nicely. And in fact, I have a free Xbox adapter to give away, since Kaico sent me one, but I'd already bought it. To be in with a chance of winning, leave a comment under this video telling me your favourite GameCube or original Xbox game, and if you're subscribed to the channel, I'll pick one at random in 2 weeks' time and I'll send this to you. Make sure it's me using this account that replies to you, not a bot, and I'll direct you to my website, davidaddis.com, where I will only ask for an address to send this, not any other details, and certainly not for any money, so please be careful of scammers. So there you go, I've really enjoyed digging up my little Nintendo console, and I have to say, it's withstood the test of time surprisingly well. It makes me wonder if in another 10 to 15 years we'll regard the Switch with the same kind of fondness. I think it definitely won't be as hackable, so it might be a bit more limited with what we can do with it in the future, but I hope I'm wrong about that. The Switch 2 is around the corner, and I look forward to seeing what's new, although I think Nintendo will follow the Switch design pretty closely, since it was such a massive success this generation. Let me know if you'd like me to review the Switch 2 when it comes out. Okay, well, I hope that was informative or at least entertaining in some way. Leave me a like and you can help me out by subscribing to my channel as well. See you next time.